Okay, so tonight the first part of our session will focus on the seasonal issue of damp, mould and condensation. Before we move on to your opportunity to ask the Council's key officers questions about issues that matter to you. So this slide is highlighting a few points about how tonight's session will run. Your cameras and microphones are turned off throughout the session, but to take part, please use the Q&A function where you can post a new question at any time throughout the session. Your questions don't need to just be about damp and mould. You can ask about anything that's important to you, but please don't type any personal details or we won't be able to publish them. And please also make sure that your words are kind and respectful where possible. If you have any difficulty with using the Q&A function this evening, you can also email your questions at talktous, all one word, at decorum.gov.uk. So just to repeat that, that's to talk to us, all one word, at decorum.gov.uk. This mailbox will also be monitored throughout the session. You will be able to see other people's questions on screen, so I am going to show you how to upvote the ones you think that we should treat as a priority to answer within this evening's session. Okay, so this slide shows you how to use the question and answer function and also how to upvote other people's questions and comments. To show us that the question and answer function is working this evening, I hope you don't mind me asking, but could you please type in the area of the borough in which you live into the Q&A chat, and that will hopefully bring up a range of different options. I'm just going to pause for a brief moment just to allow people to put their responses in, and also for those to come through on the Q&A function. And I can see someone has already put in a question, which is great. So thank you for putting in the question, and we'll come on to answering those questions later on in this evening's session. Okay, so just a reminder, the Q&A function is available for you. If you do need to, you can also send emails to the talktous@decorum.gov.uk, just a brief reminder. So now I'll explain a bit more about what you're going to see this evening. At this point, I would like to introduce the people you'll be seeing presenting to you on your screens this evening. Originally, we were meant to be having Mark Pennell, who is our Assistant Director for Property, to chair this evening. He has overall responsibility for all property management functions across our housing stock, as well as those associated within the Council's commercial portfolio. He is having a few technical issues, so we are hoping he may be able to join us later on in the call. But just to reintroduce myself again, my name is Hannah Peacock. I'm the Head of Strategy, Quality and Assurance at Dacorum Borough Council. Okay, so the other people that I'd like to introduce this evening is Dan Thurlow. He's our Head of Asset Management. Dan has responsibility for everything related to the day-to-day running of our repairs service, as well as our major works programmes. We do also have key officers from across the housing service here with us this evening. So what we're going to cover this evening is we're going to take you through a short presentation about why we take damp and mould seriously and what we are doing to help tackle damp and mould across the borough. Following this, we'll respond to the questions you've been sending in to us, as well as some of the ones that you have asked throughout the session this evening. If we don't get to your question tonight, please don't worry. Every question will be answered, and the question and answers will be published on our website. And in fact, you can see the questions and answers from the previous session that we held back in October, and that's already on our website as well. You will also notice that there is moderation in place for the questions you're asking. This simply means that we're checking for acceptable language and ensuring that no individual residents or staff members are named, so no personal details are revealed. Okay, so now I'm going to hand over to Dan Thurlow, our Head of Asset Management, who's going to be speaking to you about damp and mould, or more precisely, how we manage it once notified and how we work with you to help it prevent it coming back. Over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Hannah. Yes, damp and mould is a serious issue that's been highlighted over the past few years following the tragic case which led to new legislation known as Awaab's law. Awaab Ishak was a little boy who died in 2020, even though he and his family lived in social housing and reported extensive mould in their home. Nothing was done to fix the problem. Awaab's parents told their social landlord about the mould many times over 3 years, but he sadly died because no action was taken. This case caused public outrage and has led to changes in the law. The legislation that applies to social landlords came into place in the 27th of October and is referred to as Awaab's law. It imposes strict conditions and timescales for acting upon tenants' reports of mould in the home. All about private tenants. Most of you attending this webinar are Dacorum Borough Council tenants, and we're going to tell you about our approach to tackling damp and mould in the home. But for those of you who are leaseholders renting out your flat, you should be aware that the same protection will be extended to private tenants via the Renters' Rights Act. Specific regulations and implementation timescales for private landlords are still to be confirmed. If you have any questions about this, you can contact our private sector housing team, who offer support to the private rental sector in Dacorum, including regular landlords forums. They're also responsible for the enforcement and will take action if private landlords don't deal with serious hazards. Now I'd like to share what we're doing to tackle mould in council homes and why it's important that we take action to treat it and work with you to prevent any reoccurrence. Here are some of the typical symptoms of damp or mould starting to form in your home. We want our tenants to report problems immediately. Never wait until mould has taken hold and is damaging clothes, furniture, your home or your health. You can take action early yourself if you find mould starting to form. The anti-mould products available from the supermarket work well in dealing with small amounts of mould. You can check for obvious leaks or any other issues. And if the issue is humidity, make sure that your extractor fans are switched on and you ventilate each day by opening windows. Even a small amount of mould can have a negative impact on your health. If in doubt, report it to us and we will offer advice. We want everyone to be safe in their homes, but not everyone knows just how serious mould in the home can be. If your mould has home, then babies, young children, and people with certain health conditions could start to suffer ill health. But eventually, even a healthy adult could experience problems. We don't want anyone living in our homes to go through this. So what are we doing about it? We have a dedicated team to deal with all mould and damp issues, starting with a call centre geared up to triage the call and score the case based on the information supplied. From the call and the score, we will decide to appoint an operative to carry out a mould wash to eliminate the mould, and then an assessment is carried out to establish the cause of the issue. When we undertake a mould wash, there are usually 3 steps. Cleaning away and killing the mould is the first important step. We then carry out a second treatment to prevent the mould returning, followed by a third treatment where we apply paint containing an additive to give protection against any reoccurrence. This will normally take 2 or sometimes 3 visits to complete. We also look to understand the root cause of the mould. If there's a very small amount of mould, we may just give advice to prevent regrowth. But if it's a more serious problem, our surveyors will assess the property and establish why the mould is occurring. Our starting point is to assume that there is a defect in the property. But if we don't find anything wrong, we will aim to work with the tenant to reduce moisture levels and keep their home warm and well ventilated. We can give tailored advice depending on your home and your personal circumstances. If there are any defects or lack of insulation that may cause the problems, the surveyors will arrange for the repair works to be carried out. For complex problems, we can install an environmental sensor to measure temperature and humidity in the home. By helping us to understand the property's performance, it helps to inform us what the right solution will be. Tenants can access the system via an app to understand what's going on in their own home and also provide a prompt as to when to increase ventilation. As an organisation, we're always looking to find best practice and the ways of combating mould and damp for our residents. We have leaflets to advise both on our website and available to print, illustrating some best practices of how to manage humidity, which is one of the major causes of mould. Our surveyors share best practice and learning with each other so that we can find the best solution for each case. And here's our new secret weapon to tackle condensation. We're supplying hygrometer thermometers to help give a measure of the humidity and temperature in your homes. Relative humidity is a way of measuring how much water vapor is in the air compared to the maximum amount that air can hold at that temperature. Warm air can hold more moisture and cool air can hold less. So if the humidity is 50%, that means the air is holding half the water vapor it could hold before it becomes full. When the air gets over 60% humidity, it starts to find it difficult to hold the moisture when it meets a cold surface like an external wall or a window. This forms condensation and accounts for about 70% of the damp and mould cases we receive. At 80% humidity, you're almost certain to have issues with condensation. These little devices give a visual clue of how the property is performing, with indicators to help see if you need to heat or ventilate the property to keep humidity regulated. They don't need batteries or a power supply, they just sit on the side or the windowsill to give a visual indication of the humidity. These have been rolled out into all of our void properties to help tenants understand how to manage humidity right from the start of the tenancy. They've got a margin of error of about 5%. As your home cools, relative humidity increases as the cooler air cannot hold as much moisture, so you should be aiming for about 50% during the day to allow for cooling effect overnight. Our latest catchphrase is, stay in the green and mould will not be seen. If you like one in your home, please let us know and we'll drop one off for you. We've been working hard to address the issues of damp and mould. Although cases are more likely in cold winter months, we're seeing a steep decline, so we know our approach is working. But we can't do it without your help. We always want to work with you to get to the root cause of the problem and eliminate mould. There are times when we don't get this right. It's not always obvious what the root cause of the issue is, and sometimes there's more than one attempt to resolve the issue. However, we are here to listen to your feedback and to help. That's the end of our presentation into our approach of tackling damp and mould in your homes. In closing, our message is clear. If you suspect that you have damp and mould in your home, please report it straight away. Do not delay.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan, for that presentation. So now we can answer some of the other questions that you have been sending in to us. It's really important for us as your landlord to listen to you and to tell and use what you tell us to improve services that we deliver to you. So I believe we've had one question that has come into the Q&A chat. Bear with me whilst I just bring it up. We've started to get a few more coming through as well. The first question that I can see is, do tenants know rules recently changed about mould and damp? We only found out after a warden visit. So Dan, if you could just highlight some of the work that you and your team have been doing to communicate about the changes that have been coming up.
Sorry, Hannah, I missed that last bit part of the question. We only found out about
we only found out after a warden visit.
a warden visit.
Mm-hmm.
I presume that means a sheltered housing officer. So our actual approach to damp and mould hasn't changed because of the legislation. So our policy has already been, in most cases, the timescales for it have been much more in advance of what the legislation requires us to do. So we haven't changed our approach because of the new legislation. We knew it was coming in, and obviously the difference for us isn't around how we tackle the damp and mould, it's more around the communication we have with residents. So one of the examples of the new requirements is that we need to produce a written report to give to the resident if the threshold for Awaab's law kicks in. And for the vast majority of our damp and mould, the actual definition in the legislation is it has to be a significant hazard. and most of our damp and mold wouldn't class as that, but we will still produce the report and we'll still send it off where we can. So we're not specifically giving out communication about the new legislation, although this is part of that communication, is to give the opportunity to talk around what our approach to damp and mold is.
Lovely, thank you. Hopefully that's answered your question. But if you do want any clarification, then feel free to pop back into the Q&A chat. We've had a further question about who can get a meter to manage humidity. Is there any criteria for getting that meter?
So we pass that over to Steve.
Yeah, so there's no criteria for getting a meter. We can get meters out to everyone because obviously this helps to give a visionary inspection by the tenant to see how their home is working and how they can help regulate. So if anybody wants a meter, they can call in and we can get them delivered out to anybody. It doesn't necessarily mean if you've got mold and damp, we can get them out to all properties. So it gives you an idea to how to regulate and how to ventilate, heat your property to keep it in that green area. So there is no criteria. Anyone can have the meters.
And you mentioned phoning in for one of those. Just to reiterate, could you just provide the contact details again?
So the contact details will be, obviously, if you ring in for a repair, ring the repairs thing and ask if you want meters, and then what they will do, they will get some meters out. If you have got mold and damp at the same time, then obviously we'll go through that process. And when we've got someone visited out, all the team is they all hold the meters, so we can get them dropped off at any stage for anybody.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. And apologies, I should have realised. I don't think I've actually introduced yourself. So Steve Cooper, our responsive and key-to-key manager. Thank you very much for picking up that question.
Hello, Hannah.
Okay, so we have a further question that's just come through. Do damp and mould rules apply to council tenants only, or do they apply to the private sector, leaseholders, housing association? Can they report issues to the council, or is the council only supporting council tenants with those issues? Just picking up that leaseholder difference.
So the people in this room are focused on our council housing tenants and leaseholders. Our private sector housing team can take enforcement action around hazards that may exist in private rented properties and also in housing association property. So it's a slightly different process. It's a little bit convoluted, so they have to give them notice that there's a hazard and they have to then go and rectify that hazard. And if they don't do that, they can then take action. And those responsibilities that landlords have are going to be strengthened in the Renters' Rights Act. And the reason for that is the legislation that exists at the moment is very much around the property and the physical hazard that's there. It doesn't take into consideration the people that are living in the property. So if you can imagine, if you have someone who's got respiratory health issues and is very vulnerable to damp and mold, you need to have a different approach to someone who's perhaps barely visiting a property and is in absolutely perfect health. One would be more urgent than the other, and the current legislation doesn't really tackle that, but that's what the government are looking to change for private tenants.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that's answered your question. I do appreciate there are differences between council tenants and leaseholders, and that's something that we are aware of when we're considering damp and mould issues. I don't think we've had any other questions come into the chat, so I'm just having a look through, and any more. No, I think that's about it. I do appreciate that we have had questions that have come through before tonight's session. We have also had individual issues relating to damp and mould that have been put through, and they have been passed to Dan and Steve and the team. So they are all receiving individual responses to those issues that have been raised about individual matters. But I think the general questions have come to an end. Sue, just to bear with us, are there any themes of previous questions that have been submitted prior to tonight's session that you just wanted to bring up that tenants have previously talked to us about when we're talking about damp and mould?
So most of the people who contacted us were referring to damp and mould issues they've had in their own homes. So as you mentioned just now, we did pass that on to the responsible teams. And the only other questions we had were around things like having a named housing officer and also some general questions about communication. So we have responded individually to the people who submitted questions in advance of the meeting.
Okay, and just to reiterate, the questions that have been raised and that are both before the session and during the session will be added to a question and answer sheet, and that will go up on our website along with the recording of this session. So without further ado then, I think we will call it to a close this evening. That's it. Thank you very much. We hope you've enjoyed the session and that you've found it useful and interesting. Thank you for those of you who did engage with us in the question and answers. It really helps us to focus on what matters most to yourselves. As I said, all of the individual questions will receive a personal response, and we will publish a summary on the tenant satisfaction measures web page, along with the recording and the slides that have been presented this evening. The recording will also be shared with our sheltered scheme and on Let's Talk Decorum, so everybody has access to it. We'd also love to capture your feedback on today's session. So you will be receiving a very short follow-up survey that can help us to make the future sessions even better and hopefully to reach even more tenants and leaseholders across the borough. And also just a date for your diary, the next Spotlight on Housing will be held on Thursday the 29th of January at 6 p.m, which will be focused on all things building safety, aptly named, Do You Feel Safe in Your Home? So please register via Let's Talk Decorum, and there will be further communications coming out about that session. So again, if you could complete the survey on tonight's session, by taking part, you are helping us to shape these services and focus on the topics that matter most to you. And last but not least, if you haven't already done so, I'm just going to ask Daniel to move to the next slide. We would ask you to please register for My Decorum. This is the quickest and easiest way to access all of your DBC information, payments and services. So there should be a QR code, there we go, on screen, but it's also all over our website as well. And we would encourage you all to sign up to that. It helps you do all kinds of things online relating to council services, so highly recommended to get involved with that. Okay, so I'd just like to say thank you again for our presenter this evening and for our willing officers who have volunteered to answer your questions. And I would like to thank each and every one of you. Oh, hang on one second. I've just been notified we've got one more question. So I do want to make sure that we get all the questions in as much as possible. So the person has put, I do have health problems and changing the front door would help with drought. I've asked several times but have had no action. How can I get help as the door is old and there is nothing that can be done about it? Also, a lot of heat escapes, increasing the energy bill. So I will pass over to the team in order to respond to that. It might be something that they'll need to contact you and take away, but I'll hand over to the team.
Steve, do you want to grab that one? You're on mute if you're.
Yeah, sorry, apologies. Yeah, that's fine. So if we can, what we'll do is we'll get your address and we can come out and do an assessment on your on the door, and we can pass it to the relevant team and see whether we can get it changed. But the quickest way to do that is obviously to phone in for a repair, and then ask for the team to come out and do an assessment on the door for any repair, and then we will attend and we will assess the door. If it is up for replacement, then we will replace it. If it's an old wooden door, normally we would be looking at changing these. So that would probably be the quickest way for you to get through. Or if you want to leave your name and thing, we will get back to you in the questions, and then we'll get somebody out, a surveyor out, to assess the door.
Okay, thank you, Steve, and I'm glad we managed to get one more question in there before we call this session to a close. So thank you all again for attending, and look out on our website for the recording to come through soon.